Sometimes software can be a little rough around the edges. There's some work to polish it up. Take a look at how we did it. All right, so an important part of building software, and I know this is like the part we don't like, well,
I love it.
Maybe you love it, is testing. So tell us about the testing that we're doing in this application.
Well, I'm mostly just setting up a project and scaffolding and unit tests for one of the controllers. We don't really have time to write all the tests today. If you were making something that was, in greater than 3 days, you'd probably, plan this out a little bit ahead. And I'm actually just using XUnit because eventually, with a project like this, you probably want to run on the core framework and possibly even work on other platforms like Unix or Mac. And currently, and this obviously this will change in the future, currently XUnit is the main way that we run tests on the ASP.NET 5.
Well, awesome. For those that have never done testing but should,
sure.
Can you show us how you set this up and how this works?
It's very simple. It's basically just a ASP.NET 5 class library where I've brought in the XUnit core, which contains the attributes that declare that a particular method is a test, and a runner, which tells the core framework host how to run. Beyond that, all there is I have a command that says find a class named xunit.runnerdnx and run it when I run tests. It integrates any verb that you see in your ASP.NET 5 project like this, ends up here. If that's your active project, I can hit go. It'll find methods with the fact attribute, and you can see that's running in the desktop version of the host executable. It will find the fact attributes, run the constructor for that particular test, and there we go. So I've got the controller for prep ops activities here. I'm newing one up. I'm putting in some fake data. I'm getting out the list of activities and checking my expectations. Are there 10 of them? Right now there's not a whole lot else. So I have that for all of one controller, and then eventually we want to have that for all the major business logic and controllers on the project.
That's awesome. So there's some stuff over here that maybe people haven't seen off to the right. Can you describe what this is?
Yeah, it's sort of the evolution of IntelliTrace. To be honest, I'm not an expert in it yet, but you get all sorts of, you get memory usage. So if you scroll down here, as things run, this is only, I started it right in a debugger, so you see the graphs would show memory usage, CPU usage over time. That would be if you're actually, much more complicated stuff.
Right.
Like if you're actually doing a long-running operation in the controller, you would be able to see like, oh wow, there's a spike here, or I see a sawtooth pattern indicating that objects are swelling and then getting garbage collected. Maybe I need to be more careful there. And then I see all the different little events that have been firing: first chance exceptions, thread stepping, loading every assembly that gets loaded, that kind of stuff.
That's awesome. So are these tests integrated into the build or CI server?
Not currently, no.
Is that something that we want to do?
Yes. You can choose to run all the tests from a single DNX command line, and so you could use that and then the return value of what DNX returns at that point to decide whether a particular build is green or red.
Awesome.
So we have not gotten that far in the 3 days yet.
That's okay. So anything else you want to add about testing?
You should test.
Nice. Thanks.
Yeah.
Accessibility is an important part of any application. Let's see how we took that consideration into ours.
I've come back today mostly to help try and kick off our accessibility push to make sure that this application works everywhere. There's an interesting quote. If you go to the W3C website, there's a quote on there from Lee. And it says that, paraphrasing, that one of the greatest strengths of the internet is its universality, and making sure that every website can be used by as many people as possible is key to that power, right? And so we're building a website, we're building it for charities, we want as many people as possible to volunteer, and just because you're maybe not dexterous enough to be able to use a mouse properly, or you have some vision problems and you can't quite make out the difference between those two shades of orange,
right?
That shouldn't stop you from being able to volunteer.
That's right.
So that's what we're trying to do. Who is colorblind here?
Hunter's colorblind.
Come here.
We're gonna use the colorblindness simulator. Maybe it'll make it. Turn that.
Well, is that a thing? Did you look at this site already? Does everything look good?
Can you see it all? Because this is really low contrast.
The stuff that's tough for me to see is the login button here and the link under here as well.
So there's a cool little button I see here down at the bottom left-hand side. Can you show us what that is?
We can. These little cool hipster sunglasses things here, right? So what these are is, this is a project that Khan Academy released called Totally, with Y's instead of L's. Scott Hanselman had a blog post where he talks about this, and he has like I think a Hansel Minutes podcast where he talks about a lot of accessibility stuff. It's good.
Oh, what does it say about placeholder? Placeholder is not guaranteed to be read by assistive technology. So this gets into the assistive stuff, right?
Yeah.
So we need an ID and a label on that.
Yeah. What we got this for was we needed to be able to see, like when we first started to play around with this color scheme, we said, you know what, these oranges, lots of these oranges together seem like they're a little bit hard to see. And then over on these pages where you've got white backgrounds, some people were saying, you know, looks like this is a bit not contrasty enough, right? So what this gave us was this cool little button you can click. You can say, tell me the contrasts, and it tells you everything that doesn't, all the labels you have that don't contrast enough. And you can see it's telling me that, you know, insufficient contrast, I need to be over 3, and you know, it's suggesting contrast ratios. Like if I change it to this color, my contrast ratio will be correct.
That's really cool.
So it's given me an observation. So what I've been able to do is we've been able to turn this little tool on, say, hey, the color schemes don't contrast enough. Take it over to the UX guys that are specializing in doing this stuff and just saying, hey, there's not enough contrast in these colors. And they're like tweaking the UI. It's not just a matter of changing colors. It's like, oh, we need to make the background, we need to change this. So instead, for example, this orange is going to come up, and these labels or these low logos down here will have white behind them.
Right.
And we'll sort of adjust the whole kind of flow of the site in order to make sure that that all the colors are appropriate at the time. By flow is a bad word, just the color scheme and some of the structure here and there. And there's also a lot of other things in here like that are affecting structure, like we're missing, oh, we fixed it. We were missing an alt text on this logo for a long time, right? So these little ticks tell us that everything here's got alt text, which is important if you've got like a screen reader trying to read out the page to you. You know? Totally is JavaScript, and you can actually make a little bookmark on your browser, and you can just click it on any page you want, and it'll inject JavaScript and give you this information. What we've done is we took advantage of an ASP.NET 5 feature in tag helpers, so that over here in our layout page, you can see these green environment tags, right? So green means that these are tag helpers. They're being processed. They're not going to render exactly as they appear here. In particular, what this environment tag helper does is say everything that's in here is only going to appear when you're in the development environment. Mm-hmm. So what that means is that it looks like we're actually including totally twice, just to make sure you've got enough totally.
Just in case, yeah.
So what this means is that in development, we're going to include these JavaScript sunglasses, this little sunglass icon for everybody. As soon as we flip over to staging or production, that JavaScript it doesn't get added to the page. So whilst we're deving here, everyone around can go click this button and click contrast and see. When we push to our dev test site, because the designer guys don't even have Visual Studio with this thing running, right? So they just go to that page where we push to, and they're just tweaking colors. They're like opening up this, and they're like opening up the F12 dev tools, and they're like going and changing colors and until the contrast is right, and they're happy with it. And so they've now got this cool flow where they're like, okay, I'm gonna select this element that's got bad stuff, and I'm gonna play with its CSS over here.
That's
and
cool.
I'm going to just reapply this until it
happens.
Yeah. And then I've got a color scheme baseline that I can play with.
All right, bud. Thanks for spending some time with us.
No problems. I'm happy to do it.
Cheers, mate. Sometimes it's good to see how our application will handle things in the real world. Let's see how we tested that. What are you doing on the project now? What is your job here at Roll?
Done a lot of backend API stuff. Right now I've been doing load testing, so we stood up the website on Azure and ran the VSO load test against it, just to see what it would look like if hundreds of users were hitting it at the same time.
Now this is something that we kind of, as developers, put off to like the very, very end. It'd be great if you give us a demo on how the load testing is actually set up, and then what it looks like when it's running.
Oh, absolutely. I've already done a run here recently, so I stood it up, I published to Azure, took just a few seconds. Then if I wanted to do another one, I'll just open another window here so I can keep that one around.
And this is all in VSO, right?
Yeah, of course. You still have cases where you want to do traditional load testing, which I've been on teams who do that, where you gather traces of yourself going to a site, you anonymize those traces for any specific URLs that might actually change time over time, and then you deal with the, sometimes you're going to go down error code paths and stuff.
Right.
That's a lot more work to set up, and that's probably why your experience is people don't do it as much. With this one, this is actually my first experience with VSO load testing. It was super easy. I had a good time. You just put in the URL you want. Give it a name, pick a number of users. I've generally been picking 200 because why not? It seems
Holy cow,
fun.
this is a lot easier than I would have thought.
Yeah, and you just you pick how often people want to click and what browser mix you have. Between IE and Chrome, the two most dominant browsers, of course. Click test, and that's about it. And
So what is it doing? Is it actually clicking on stuff or pulling pages?
Yeah.
What is it doing during the load
It's
test?
spinning up agent processes that run on VMs in the data center. So this was the Eastern US data center that it picked. And so you have 100 fake users who are just randomly clicking around. So if we look, so it's going to start there in a second. If you look at one that's already run, it ran for 5 minutes. It did 236,000 requests. And then you have metrics of response time, how many users were actively logged in at once. And then we have here, the robots found some places they weren't allowed to go, and they managed to get some failed requests for 403 forbidden. And we could see that this was every combo box set to the maximum, 200 things clicking once a second. I managed to max out the CPU usage on the VM that's running it a few times.
Nice.
So that's interesting. We can look over here. This is already running, and it's going to run for a minute, and it's already starting to kick up graphs of what's happening. So much, much easier than it used to be.
And there's nothing that you had to do the actual application to do the load testing. It's just something that's completely external. Is that
Nope,
right?
just had to publish it somewhere that they could hit.
That's awesome. So what surprised you most about this whole experience?
Well, I thought it was going to take me a while to figure out how to do it. But as soon as I found the load test button in VSO, yeah, it was just the fact that it's less than 6 clicks and you're done.
Lesson to us kids, just click on stuff and you figure it out. Well,
Yeah.
thanks so much, man.
Thank you.
It's just amazing, the volunteer effort, the passion, and what they put into this. 3 days seems like both a lot of time and not a lot of time. I think what's impressed me the most is folks have really kind of dug in and solved the hard problems. So hopefully you've had a chance to watch what everybody's been doing here, see how fast the app was able to be built in just a few days, and maybe that's inspired you a little bit to yourself want to volunteer your time, your technical skills. We'd love it if you helped out with the application. It's going to be available up on our GitHub repository at github.com/htbox. You'll see the code as well as the issues that you can go and tackle and help support with us. Software and technology is used by every responder, everybody who's out there saving people after responses, as well as being prepared to save people or to not have to save them. So literally the code you write will be run by people who are saving lives. So the more efficient they are, the more lives that are saved. So a line of code could save a life.
It's great to see how code can actually change lives. We're really proud of the work we've been able to do with 15 developers over the last 3 days. But this is only the beginning. We want you to take the work forward and make it even better. Hopefully you've enjoyed watching this as much as we've enjoyed making it. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time.